Oh, it's hot. Right. Alright, welcome to my research evaluation. Today I'm going to be walking you through the research post on my blog for my F&P. So let's get into it. So I started off with some practitioner research. So I went straight onto Vimeo, had a look around, and I found this one short film called Devolver Digital: The Return of Volvi. And I absolutely loved the lighting and the style of the entire short film. Um, so I looked into who made it, and it turns out that it was Joseph Pelling. So I was like, ah, the name kind of rings a bell. So I looked into his name, and I realized that he made Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. And he also made this Tame Impala um, music video, which I really like. Source, it's got the bright colors again. And I was like, alright, he's pretty cool. That's something I didn't know, that he also did this. I also found out that Devolver Digital is actually a video game company, a real one, and they actually they actually made um, a game that I've been looking into recently called Hotline Miami, and I had no idea that the studio was actually real. Um, it just shows how much I know about anything really. Um, and then I moved on to Tamara Rosenfeld. Um, Now, before I get into her, I'm going to explain why I have NA next to her name. So, my idea has changed quite a few times. So a lot of my research is now not useless, but I'm not using it for the actual product. So I've put an NA next to it to just mark that I'm not using it for the project, and I just want to evidence that I've done work. Because if I removed all of it, it would look like I've done nothing. Um, but I looked into Tamara Rosenfeld because I wanted to have a black and white noir scene in the original idea. Um, and I found this Jameson advert that she did. And I looked into it and I was like, oh, this is interesting. But then I found out that this is the only film uh, thing that she's directed or done anything to do with. Which was a shame, but I decided to message her about it. Um, so I said, Dear Tamara Rosenfeld, I'm a student from Exeter College studying film production. I adore your film noir advert you directed for Jameson Whiskey. I stumbled across it when researching the film noir style for my film, and that I'm making at the moment, where I'll be experimenting with the genre. Could I perhaps ask you a few questions about it? Hoping that, she would see that and she would be like, "Oh, sure thing! I love that you like my advert." But she apparently has better things to be doing, and she didn't message me back, which is a massive shame. Uh, but then after her, I just moved on, and I decided, well, I gotta find who was actually gonna watch it, right? So, I made uh, a survey. I had several questions. I got 13 people responding. Um, One thing that I will say though is I don't think I should have given it to my friends because they didn't exactly take it seriously. For example, someone called themselves Anita Maxwin, which is a Drake reference. There's Quandale Dingle. That's an interesting one. Walter White as well, a classic. There's a few others, but I don't want to get into all of them at the moment. I just need to move on. So then I asked how old they are. The majority were 18 to 24, which is, realistic because, I asked my peers. But then I had a few outliers. Like I had someone say that they were 54 to 65, and I had someone that said that they were 45 to 54. So I don't really think that that is real, unless one of my teachers did it, maybe. But then there were two other results which were kind of outliers, but I'm gonna keep in and I'm gonna presume that they're real. There was two people who said that they were under 18, which I guess is realistic because it's not too far away from the sort of age group. There's a couple of people who aren't 18 yet in the class as well, so and then there was also someone that said that they were 25 to 34, which is, I think, pushing it a bit, but it is quite close to the sort of, area that I was interviewing. So I'm keeping that in as well. So then I asked them if they liked comedies, just to know if, their data would be useful, because I'm making a comedy, so I need to know what people who like comedies like. All of them said yes, except from one person, which was very helpful. And then here I asked if they liked meta comedies. I understand that not everyone would know what a meta comedy is, so I did ask them if they liked them, but then I also gave them a third option to just say that they don't know what it is. And then if they did press that they didn't know what it was, it would bring them to question 5, which explains it and then asks if they understand the explanation. And then it brings them to question 6, which asks if they like them now that they have had it explained to them. And then all of them, except from this one little problem here, I think that it was a problem with Microsoft Forms, because I looked at it and I don't think, or I couldn't see any reason for why this happened, but someone got to question 5, put yes for understanding the explanation, but then they didn't answer question 6, so maybe it was someone that, like, hang on. 4 people said that they don't know what it was, so only 4 people were brought here, so I don't know why there was a 5th person. One of life's mysteries, I guess. I don't think I'll ever find out about that, but oh well. After that, I thought, oh, I think I could do with a bit more information for it. So I made a in-person survey, which I went around the class. I got Caleb, Daniel, Freddie, Dom, Phoebe, Nolan, and Robin to do it. I collated some data. I asked them how old they were, how tall they were, if they had a job, if so, what job, what their favourite colour was, if they like comedy, and if they like meta comedy. So again, find out if the information was going to be useful to me. So I went through all this, and I made a full table of it, and I talked about, average height, average age, that sort of thing. I found out what their favorite color was, and I concluded that my audience were 18-year-olds, which are 5'5", like warm colors, and have low-level jobs, which is very helpful. Now, this is a bit of EduBlog's charm here. I put this in a column. This was a normal size when I was editing it, but for some reason it likes to do this sometimes, and it just grows massively and just it doesn't fit in with the cover at all. But I looked into BBFC guidelines and I concluded that it would be a 12 because there are a couple of swears. There isn't any like illegal drugs or alcohol or anything like that at the beginning, so I decided that it would be about a 12. And then I also had to look into the ethicalness of uh, the characters and my storyline, and I realized that I have an evil Russian character, which is a bit of an interesting choice for current events. So I did look into it, and I put down reasons why it would be alright and reasons why it wouldn't be alright, and then I looked into the reasoning for these, and I assessed if that was accurate. So for example, I talked about how the character was pre-established, and I made him several years ago, before everything happened. Uh, this is something that basically all of Hollywood and all filmmakers do, really, because it's a very common film trope that, villains are evil. Well, a lot of villains are Russian. And James Bond is a very big culprit for making Russian villains. Uh, then I decided to look into why it might not be okay. So I looked into the Russian invasion at the moment of Ukraine. Uh, I was a bit torn about it because it's not a very good situation, I guess. Uh, and it might be a bit insensitive, but then I concluded that since I'm not alluding anything to uh, like the actual situation or anything like that, I think that it would be fine. And then I moved on to the fact that it's a character that's in the Russian mafia, and I just decided. Well, I looked into like the history of it and why it started and when it started and uh, what they do, and I just concluded that they've got better things to be doing than going after a college student that made a short film which was slightly insensitive. But then I just decided that I might just remove the Russian persona from the character because, first off, I think that the voice that I put on for the character originally was a bit cheesy and it didn't really fit with the style that I was going for, and also the voice is just really tiring to do, and I couldn't really be bothered to do that. Um, excuse me. But then after I got through all this, I decided to go for contextual research. So I went through a few of my inspirations. So one of them being the Stanley Parable. That's what it says here, but it's having some problems apparently. So I went into the history of it. Uh, I spoke about the creators, uh, William Pugh and Davey Roden, who you can't see because he's behind this one. Uh, I spoke about the history of the game, but then I decided to go into something that's a bit more specific to my film. Since my film is talking about the inner workings of the film itself, I decided to talk about the areas of the game where the game changes itself and is kind of in charge of how it's showing itself and how uh, it's like portrayed and things like that, and how the game changes itself to kind of hinder the player. So a good area that I talked about was the baby game room, uh, where you have to press this button here to stop a baby from going into this fire, and the developers coded in that this can go on for like multiple hours, and in the original game, they didn't have any ending or any like prize for getting to the end. But when they brought out the sequel, the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe, which was a kind of copy of the game but with extra content and things like that, they added the puppy, who is slowly being dropped into a shredder. So you have to press the button to stop the puppy from falling as well, which is over there. And then it stops the player from just pressing the button, and it forces them to actually move and be actively playing the game for this long extended period of time. And to reward players for doing this for up to 4 hours, they actually added a ending where the embodiment of modern art talks to you. It sounds I sound insane right now, but that's what happens. The physical embodiment of modern art comes and talks to you, and it's portrayed as this deity character. And it says that when you die, you'll go into the afterlife and you'll spend eternity with it, and how you it's it's a really strange game. I love it though. See, look, this is the physical embodiment of divine art, the essence of divine art. Sorry. I was also talking about how the character of the narrator is possibly sentient. I didn't talk about him for very long though. Looking back, I should have talked about him more. This is the main inspiration that I had for my film though. Dr. Langeskov, the Tiger, and the Terribly Cursed Emerald, A Whirlwind Heist, which is another game. Excuse me. Where it plays with the idea that video games aren't actually digital, and they're more physical spaces where the player goes through them like escape rooms, and there's like a team in the background which is making the game function around them. And this puts the player in the perspective of these workers. And I love this game also. This was like, I don't want to say I stole the idea, because I didn't. But I definitely was inspired by this game heavily. But anyway, I also talked about Jazzpunk because I wanted to encapsulate the writing of Jazzpunk, but I concluded that it was simply just too strange for my idea. It's just, well, as you can see here, it says Jazzpunk's writing is very bizarre, fitting for the Adult Swim, but at base level, Jazzpunk was inspired by cartoons and wait, actually no, don't need to talk about it here. But like, for example, some of the missions that you have to go on, you have to go into a Soviet consulate to steal a file, but then I think it's like the next level or something like that. You go through Tokyo and you have to steal a cowboy's artificial kidney. It's just everywhere all at once. Well, everything everywhere all at once is it's insane. But it's also a great game. So I looked into this character, the director, who is kind of like he's kind of like Q from James Bond, but he briefs you on each mission, and I was going to talk about how the character is portrayed and how he's written and things like that. Anyway, I spoke about Hotline Miami, which I spoke about earlier, and I was going to talk about how they use sounds to alter the feelings of the consumer, and how they use music to portray different things. I was going to have this originally when it was going to be a physical space which the character would be walking through, because there was going to be multiple different characters, and I was going to have unique music to play in the background of for each of the characters when they were on screen. For example, the detective for the noir or the film noir segment was going to have this this low like jazz, I guess. Um, and that's about it. But I had to make this not applicable because obviously these characters don't exist anymore, and there was no way to fit in music based on the characters in the form that it is now. Uh, and then I moved on to some technical research. Um, in the past, I've had problems with Final Cut Pro, so the college doesn't really update all of them like consistently. So a lot of them are in different updates, so I could only edit on specific MacBooks. So I decided to just learn how to use uh, Premiere Pro, which is it's definitely complicated, but it should be better to use when I've got the hang of it. So I looked into specific things that I'd need for the film, like chroma keying, because a lot of it was going to be on green screen, freeze frames, because there was a lot of moments where the screen would just freeze and then things would happen around the screen, sort of thing. And then I went on to budget. You know, budget's important. I talked about how my actual budget would be zero because all of my equipment that I was going to use was just borrowed, either from college or friends. And then I also looked into how much it would be to rent all of this equipment and how much it would be to buy all of this equipment as well, just to talk a bit more about this. And it was looking quite bare. And I realized how expensive equipment actually is. It sounds stupid me saying it now, but it's I was genuinely like surprised because according to like if you go onto Amazon and you look for a green screen, a camera, a microphone, and a boom pole, it totals to like over £600, sorry, which is insane, which is just really unrealistic for me at the moment, but maybe it would be good to look into when I've got the funds to buy all of that and when I'd be using it more consistently so I could actually, make my money's worth. But then I also talked about how renting it is significantly cheaper, uh, which was 90 quid for all of the equipment for one day, which would be more realistic if I was just starting out, well, which is going to be me when I finish college. Uh, so I think I'll look into this when I just make films for fun, and maybe when I'm trying to get them into film festivals and different things like that. I also looked into how to distribute all my films. So I looked into some film festivals. I looked into some comedy ones. I looked into London Comedy Film Festival. Uh, I noted down their website, the date that they were established, and like their description. I looked into the International Comedy Film Festival as well. I talked about the same things. And then I also looked into some surrealist like film festivals as well. So I looked at the Surreal and Uncanny Film Festival. I talked about that sort of thing as well, and Surreal Film Fest as well, which is really really new considering, which because it came out in the first ever Surreal Film Fest was in 2022. Sorry. which I was really surprised by. I also concluded that I'd more likely put it into the Surreal Film Festival as well, because a lot of the comedy ones are very, very big, and it's like only like really professional people doing them. But these seem a lot more inviting. For example, Surreal, uh, all of their like entry fees are just completely free, and it's encouraging new filmmakers and people who don't have these big budgets. Uh, but then I also was like, oh, well, I'm putting it onto YouTube, but then I might as well put it onto another platform, uh, and I could use Vimeo. So I tried to set up an account, but then I realized that there was already an account under my email, which I was surprised by, and I sent a password reset to my email, and it turns out that I'd already made one, but I just completely forgot about it. I've no idea when I made this, or where it came from, or why I made it, but I've got the new password now, and it's all ready for when it's ready, uh, for when my actual like film is ready, and I can just stick it on there, stick it onto YouTube, and bing bang bosh, I've got another audience to look into. Uh, but yeah, that concludes all of my research. Overall, I think that I could have done a bit more because I did spend a lot of time on like contextual research, which I ended up not using because of all of the changes. But then obviously I couldn't really work around this because I didn't know that I would be not using all of this work. But I did enjoy looking into all of these things because these are games which I'm really passionate about and things like that. I also, well, I think that's about it. Actually, I think. Um, so yeah, thank you for uh, watching my research evaluation. Uh, I hope you enjoy my film when it's out and it's all finished. Goodbye.